What are trend lines? What is the significance of a trend line? How can I identify strong trend lines? Today, we will answer this and more. Hello everyone. StockShaala is pleased to welcome you to its 4th episode on technical analysis. Today, it's all about trend lines. Technical analysis is based on the philosophy that price moves in repeated patterns. Construction of most of these price patterns are based on trend lines. Trend lines, therefore, are one of the fundamental building blocks of technical analysis. A trend line provides a visual representation of the market's underlying trend. It helps you to remove all the noise in the market and focus on what the market is actually doing. An uptrend line is formed in a rising market. In a rising market, price moves making higher highs and higher lows. The first step in identifying an uptrend is to mark these higher lows. An uptrend line is then formed by simply connecting these higher lows together. A downtrend line is formed in a falling market. In a falling market, price moves making lower highs and lower lows. The first step in identifying a downtrend is to mark these lower highs. A downtrend line is then formed by simply connecting these lower highs together. A horizontal trend line or a sideways trend line is formed in a consolidating market. In a consolidating market, price moves sideways, forming identical highs or lows. The first step in identifying a horizontal trend is by marking these identical highs or lows. A horizontal trend line is then formed by connecting these identical highs or lows together. We've now seen 3 primary types of trends: uptrend, downtrend, and horizontal trend. But why trend lines? Why do we care about it? Well, we do care about it because trend lines act as support or resistance lines. An uptrend line acts as a support line. A downtrend line acts as a resistance line. A horizontal trend line could either act as a support or resistance depending on whether it connects highs or lows. From the previous episode about support and resistance, we know that whenever price approaches a support or a resistance zone, something interesting happens. That's exactly why trend lines are important. The market is watching these. Whenever price reaches this zone, usually either a reversal or a breakout occurs. Now that we've understood the significance of trend lines, how do we identify significant trend lines? Consider the following line. Would you consider this line as a trend line? Let's take a closer look. The trend line here only connects one higher low. A trend line cannot be drawn with only one point. That means it's an arbitrary line. It's not a trend line. This brings us to the first rule in identifying significant trend lines. Trend line must connect at least 2 troughs or crests. Let's try and connect 2 troughs in the same pattern. We now have a significant trend line. Actually, we could try and form a stronger trend line on the same chart. The aim is to try and connect as many points as possible to provide us with a reliable trend line. Let's try and do that. We now have a trend line that connects 4 troughs. So this is a significant trend line. Sometimes you could draw and redraw multiple trend lines on the same chart, particularly as the chart evolves with time. It then becomes a matter of judgment to decide what's the best trend line. This brings us to the second rule in identifying strong trend lines. The more the number of touches, the better. The final criteria that determines a good trend line is the duration of the trend. If the duration of the trend line is only a few weeks, then it's probably a minor trend and not of significant importance. If the duration of the trend is, however, several months or years, then this trend line is extremely significant and worth considering. Sometimes both the relative highs and lows tend to go in parallel with each other, forming a channel. A channel is formed when the crests and troughs can be connected to form a channel. An uptrend channel is formed when both the higher highs and higher lows move in parallel. A downtrend channel is formed when both the lower highs and lower lows move in parallel. A horizontal channel is formed when both the identical highs and identical lows move in parallel. Let's take a look at a real-life chart and see how to identify a trend line. Today, I have with me the stock of Siemens India Limited on the National Stock Exchange. Looking at the chart here, it's clear that this is a downtrend, isn't it? Let's identify the highs. High, 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 and high. Let me try and connect them to see the trend line. There we go. I think I'm trying to connect maximum highs. Yeah. So right there. There we go. Now, is this a significant trend line? Let's run through our rules. Rule number 1, the line should connect at least 2 troughs or crests. We have 1, 2, 3, and 4. So rule number 1, check. Rule number 2, the more the number of touches, the better. Is there a way to draw another trend line with more number of touches? I don't think so. I think this is the best we can have. We have 4 touches and this is a significant trend line. So rule number 2, check. Rule number 3, the duration of the trend line. Let's see what's the duration of this trend line. This trend line started somewhere in July 2017 and is there up until January 2019. That's roughly about a year and a half. A trend line with a duration of about a year and a half is definitely a significant trend line. So rule number 3, check. Thinking about this further, I think we may be able to connect the lows together as well. Let's see if this turns out to be a channel, Let's try that. Oh yeah, I think it is a channel. There we go. Let's try and make it parallel. Yeah, there we go. So we actually have a downtrend channel here by connecting the identical lows and highs. Moving it forward in time, we see that this downtrend line, which is acting as a resistance, is broken. And whenever that was broken, the resistance line now acts as a support line, and there's been a big move in the direction of the breakout. So that's why trend lines are significant. I'd highly encourage you to look up your favorite stocks and try and identify trend lines, trend channels, and see what happens whenever stock approaches those lines. Thank you very much for listening. If you liked this episode, please click on the like and subscribe button. If you have any feedback or questions, put them down in the comment section below. Happy learning!